Rain poured down Venom Boulevard like bullets fired from a pitch-black sky. Each drop carried the acrid scent of sulfur and ozone. I felt every drop pierce through the dark biomorphic membrane enveloping my body. A perfect incubation sac formed from liquefied asphalt, ash-laced sewage, and luminescent blue blood veins like faulty neon lights. This was my third rebirth, and emerging from the sac still made me shiver as it had before. My skin was viscous, coated in a metallic-smelling transparent fluid. Sharp bone spikes protruded from my elbows and knees, gleaming blue under the streetlights. I inhaled deeply, tasting the late-night air, a strange mix of ozone and sulfur, of life and death. That was when I realized I was fully awake, ready for a new workday. The Umbral Loom tower pierced the sky like a colossal finger, accusing the heavens. Built in 1847 by the Consortium of Collective Nightmares, a clandestine organization of mad scientists and supernatural entities, this tower had become the world's largest fear collection and processing center. The building's surface wasn't ordinary concrete. It was living concrete, made by blending cement with stem cells from ancient organisms. It breathed out thick gray smoke in a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. Each breath inhaled fear from the surrounding air and exhaled mildly hallucinogenic hormones. Dozens of smoked glass security eyes rolled in their sockets. Each eye was directly connected to the tower's central brain. They didn't just observe every movement on the street, but could also read each person's fear levels. They watched me as I approached the main gate, and I felt a familiar sensation of being scrutinized, judged by a standard only entities like me understood. The Umbral Loom's elevator was unlike any other in the world. It was made of raw flesh. Crimson muscle fibers coiled into elastic cables that stretched and flexed with every movement. A heart, acting as a piston, lay at its center, beating 60 times a minute, pumping black sanguine fluid to the higher floors. As I stepped in, the elevator floor quivered beneath my feet, as if recognizing a new passenger. 13th and a half, I said to the small microphone growing from the elevator wall. The elevator began its ascent with a wet, groaning sound. Through the glass panels, I saw hundreds of glass jars dangling from the ceiling. Each held glistening drops of fear memories, like liquid diamonds. This was where the Umbral Loom collected and processed fear from across the world, and I, Nero Thorne, was about to become a part of this horrifying machinery. The 13th and a half floor was a strange half-floor space, bisected by a curved glass wall, giving the sensation of standing inside the belly of a colossal whale. Vesper Morrow stood waiting for me. Her smile was like a gash across her pale face. Her garment was sewn from human skin, fragments meticulously stitched together to form perfect pleats. Her teeth had been replaced with tiny steel saws, sparkling silver when she smiled. Nero Thorne, her voice was sweet, yet ghoulish. Welcome to the Umbral Loom. I am Vesper Morrow, your guide for your first few days. She led me down a long corridor, its walls covered with colossal organizational charts. The Umbral Loom operated on a strict pyramid model. At the very apex was the Board of Nightmares, a council of 7 ancient entities who had lived for millennia. Each entity specialized in a different type of fear: death, loneliness, madness, pain, abandonment, darkness, and the unknown. The second tier was the Prime Fear Extraction Chamber, where scientists and sorcerers collaborated to research the nature of fear. They had discovered that fear wasn't just an emotion, but a form of energy that could be collected, refined, and utilized. This technology was called neuroscience harvesting. The internship department was on the lowest tier, where creatures like me were recruited. We were the collectors, entities who gathered fear from its source. Each intern was given a monthly quota, and failing to meet it meant being recycled, a process I wasn't eager to learn about. The Umbral Loom isn't just an organization, Vesper explained as we passed a conference room with a table made from colossal spinal bones. We are part of a global emotional ecosystem. We harvest fear from human dreams and nightmares, transforming them into energy for higher purposes. Higher purposes? I asked. You'll understand in time. She smiled mysteriously. For now, you just need to know that your job is to collect fear from children, the purest source of fear. She stopped before a black door, etched with the image of a weeping child. Before we begin, do you have any questions? I started to open my mouth, but a raspy laugh cut me off. Sepp Grimm stepped out from a dark corner, his smile like a gash across his skeletal face. He was tall and gaunt, his skin like old parchment, his eyes like deep hollows filled with shadow. "A new intern, eh?" Sepp looked me up and down with a contemptuous gaze. "Doesn't look like much. Hope you last longer than the last one." "The last one?" I asked. "Recycled into raw material," Sepp sneered. "Didn't meet the minimum quota." "You know, this job requires special talent." Vesper patted my shoulder, her nails raking my skin, leaving tiny scratches. "Don't let Sepp worry you. He's just jealous there's competition." She led me into the orientation room. It was a small room with a desk made of skulls and chairs upholstered in human skin. On the desk lay a black box, next to a vial of glowing blue antiseptic. "Valence," Vesper called, and a young woman emerged from a dark corner. Valence had a strange appearance. The left half of her face was normal, the right half metallic. She approached, holding a needle as thick as a thumb. Without a word, she plunged the needle into my palm and began to sew. Each stitch left a glowing blue thread. "This is your identification mark," Vesper explained. "It helps you move through different layers of reality." When Valence finished, she poured antiseptic over the wound. It felt like fire burning through every nerve, but I didn't cry out. I had endured far worse pain in the past. "Now for the most important part." Vesper opened the black box. Inside was a contract written on human skin, the ink a crimson like dried blood. Beside it lay a quill pen made from a bird bone, sharpened like a syringe. "The intern contract," she said. "You will have to collect 100 units of fear within 30 nights. If you fail to do so, you will be recycled." I read the terms written in runic script. Most were standard regulations: working hours, operational areas, fear collection methods. But one thing caught my eye: interns must submit the required amount of fear. Failure to comply will result in contract termination and recycling into raw material. "What does recycling into raw material mean?" I asked. Vesper laughed, a sound like scraping metal. "You will be decomposed into your basic components and used to create new interns. The process is quite painful." I signed my name in my own blood. As soon as the ink dried, I felt something crawling in my stomach. Not just a biological clock, but an artificial organ implanted in my stomach. It didn't just count down from 30 days, it also monitored the amount of fear I collected. This organ was directly connected to my nervous system, allowing the Umbral Loom to know my exact progress. "And this," Vesper said, pointing to a small cut on my neck, "is the punishment chip model X7. This is our most advanced technology, developed from research into the nervous systems of supernatural entities." I felt a throbbing sensation in my spine, as if something was digging deep into my bone marrow. This chip wasn't merely a punishment device. It was a miniature AI system that could analyze my intentions and emotions. If I harbored any treacherous intent, it would detect it by analyzing my hormones and neural impulses. "The X7 chip has 3 modes," Vesper explained excitedly. "Warning mode will cause mild pain. Punishment mode will cause temporary paralysis. Liquidation mode, well, you wouldn't want to experience that." "Liquidation?" I asked. "Completely destroys the nervous system within 3 seconds," she said, as if discussing the weather. "This is why our intern's success rate is 97.3%. As for the other 2.7%, she shrugged. "Now for the fun part." Vesper stood up. "Your first mission." She activated a hologram screen that showed a small room with a pink bed and pastel yellow curtains. On the bed lay an 8-year-old girl with curly brown hair, sleeping soundly with a teddy bear. "Ophelia Duran," Vesper said. 8 years old, primal fear level 3, but there's something special. This child shows signs of latent psychic abilities. That's why she's a priority target." I looked at the image of the little girl. Something in her eyes, even in sleep, made me uneasy, not out of fear, but a strange, indescribable feeling. As if she was looking back at me through the screen. "You will appear under her bed," Vesper continued. "Create frightening sounds to wake her and make her afraid. The more afraid she is, the more energy you will collect." She led me to a metal door etched with runic symbols. "The phase shift door. It will take you directly to the location." When the door opened, I saw a colossal mouth with diamond-like teeth, and inside, a pitch-black tunnel. I stepped in, feeling as if I was being swallowed by an unseen monster. The process of spatial displacement was a horrifying experience. I felt my body stretch, my bones contract, my flesh contort. It was like being torn into 1,000 pieces and randomly reassembled. When my dizziness subsided, I found myself in a cramped, pitch-black space under the bed. I could hear the child's steady breathing above me. The space was only about 20 centimeters high, and I had to contort my body to fit. My spine curved like a snake, my limbs folded at unnatural angles. My mission was to create fear. I started with small sounds, fingernails scratching on wood, a faint wheezing breath. I blew a current of damp, mossy air from the crack in the bed frame. The nightlight on the table flickered as if about to die. But then something unexpected happened. Ophelia woke up. She didn't cry, didn't scream. Instead, she gently leaned down and looked under the bed. Her hazel brown eyes sparkled in the faint light, and when she saw me, she wasn't afraid. "Are you cold, mister?" she asked softly. That question hit me like a punch to the heart. I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest, not fear, not pain, but something warm and gentle. My auxiliary heart, a biological organ implanted to collect fear, skipped a beat. The nightmare fluid in my body began to dwindle. The alarm system in my head blared loudly. I was failing my mission, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the child's innocent gaze. Then the ceiling light flickered on. "Ophelia, what is it, dear?" A middle-aged woman rushed into the room. She looked under the bed and saw me. Her face went pale, her mouth agape in horror. That was when I realized how I must look through normal eyes, a dark, slender creature with sharp bone spikes, slimy skin, and eyes glowing like embers. "Oh my God," the mother screamed. I had to get out of there. I used the shadow folding trick, a skill I'd learned from previous rebirths. My body contracted into a black ribbon, bending and slipping through the cracks in the floor like a snake made of smoke. When I returned to the Umbral Loom, I knew I was in deep trouble. Vesper Mara was waiting for me in the orientation room, her face expressionless. "How many units of fear did you collect?" "None. Nothing," I admitted. "Nothing," she repeated, her voice dangerous. "Do you know the penalty for failing your first mission?" Before I could answer, the floor beneath my feet opened up. I fell into another room where a giant metal gantry stood with chains and meat hooks. This was the flaying room. 2 humanoid monsters in doctors' masks dragged me onto the gantry. They bound me to 4 meat hooks, each connected to a chain. When the system activated, I felt as if my body was about to be torn into 4 pieces. "The flaying process will separate skin from flesh," a robotic voice announced from the speakers. "This will help the intern better understand the cost of failure." The pain began slowly. First, it felt like thousands of needles piercing my skin. Then my skin began to peel from my body piece by piece. Bones cracked and grated as blood and fat streamed onto the floor. But even in this horrific agony, I couldn't forget Ophelia's question. "Are you cold, mister?" Something had changed within me, and I knew that life at the Umbral Loom would never be what I expected. When the flaying process ended, I was hung on a hook to dry. My skin lay strewn across the floor like torn rags, but I knew this wasn't just punishment. It was a necessary procedure to restructure my nervous system, helping me adapt to new nanosensors that had been implanted. Vesper approached, holding a grimoire bound in human skin. She began to chant spells in Enoyan, the language of supernatural entities. Each word she uttered created sound waves of a special frequency that accelerated the healing process. "This is just a warning," she said, closing the book. "Next time, the consequences will be far worse. You need to understand that the Umbral Loom has existed for 178 years. We've seen thousands of entities like you come and go. Those who comply will be promoted. Those who resist will become raw material." I hung there all night. Blood dripped from my wounds, forming a black pool beneath my feet. Each drop of blood held a part of my memory, images from the past, emotions I had once felt. The Umbral Loom collected all of this, missing no detail. But in my mind, I still saw Ophelia's innocent eyes and her small, yet meaningful, question. That question had triggered something deep in my DNA, a hidden gene sequence that even I didn't know existed. I was born from the confluence of millions of fears. But during my formation, a small amount of hope had also mingled in. Hope for a better future, for the idea that Y2K wouldn't truly end the world. And now, that hope was awakening. Perhaps this was the first time in my life anyone had cared if I was cold, and that had awakened something within me, something I didn't know I possessed, a seed of human emotion. When dawn broke, I still hung there, but a decision had formed in my heart. I would find a way to complete the contract, but not in the way the Umbral Loom desired. I would uncover the truth about this organization, and I would protect children like Ophelia, even if it cost me my life. My story had only just begun, and it would be a bloody and horrifying tale. But it would also be a story of redemption and hope, of finding humanity in the darkest world. I, Nero Thorn, the shadow demon from the deepest nightmares, had learned what warmth felt like, and I would never forget it. 3 days after the flaying, I awoke in the Umbral Loom's inhumane operating room. This meant I had only 20-something days left to complete the contract. My body hung suspended in midair by thin steel wires piercing through my ribs, like a giant puppet in a madman's hands. White-blue surgical lights shone directly onto my bare flesh, revealing every black fluid circulating vein. The machine doctor standing beside me was unlike any creature I had ever seen. Its upper half was polished metal like a mirror, its lower half was fresh, bleeding flesh. 8 metal arms protruded from its back. Each arm held a different surgical tool: pliers, scalpels, needles, and something that looked like a small drill bit. Intern 847, its voice rasped like scraping metal. The skin regeneration process will begin. You will feel a slight discomfort. A slight discomfort? I wanted to laugh but couldn't, my throat held open by a metal clamp. The machine doctor began its work by implanting something called a root borer into my sternum. It was a small device, the size of a fingertip, shaped like a metallic spider with 8 tiny legs. As it was embedded in my bone, I felt hair-thin filaments plunge deep into my bone marrow, connecting to my nervous system. The root borer will help you collect fear more efficiently, the machine doctor explained while stitching the incision. It will analyze the victim's fear and automatically adjust your method. Then my skin was brought in, processed, and re-dyed. But instead of reattaching it as before, the machine doctor sewed it back in a complex runic pattern. Each stitch glowed blue, forming ancient symbols all over my body. These runes will optimize the process of fear collection and conversion, the machine doctor said. Once the final stitch is complete, your efficiency will increase 3-fold. When I was lowered, I felt different. My body still ached, but a new power coursed through my veins. The runic lines on my skin were like electric snakes, occasionally glowing as I moved. While waiting, my mind drifted to memories from the past. 1999 wasn't just the year I was born. It was also the year humanity first created a collective nightmare event, a global-scale collective nightmare. The Y2K fear wasn't simply anxiety about computers. It was the fear of an era's end, of technology something humanity had trusted potentially betraying them. Billions of people worldwide feared the same thing at the same time. That fear energy created a colossal emotional maelstrom, and from that maelstrom, I emerged. I remember the first moment of consciousness was not being born like a child, but suddenly existing with full knowledge of my nature. I knew who I was, where I came from, and what I existed to do. I was a nightmare construct, a product of collective fear. In my early years, I fled everywhere. The Vatican had a secret department called Sanctum Umbra, a unit specializing in hunting supernatural entities. They had weapons forged from sacred metals, holy texts that could bind souls, and priests trained to exterminate entities like me. I had to hide in abandoned nuclear reactors because the high radiation could mask my supernatural energy signature. Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 Mile Island, I had lived through them all. The radiation didn't harm me, but loneliness did. For 25 years, I had no emotional connection with any other being. I existed, but I did not live. I was a fear-collecting machine with no purpose other than to exist, until the Umbral Loom found me. The sound of an alarm clock pulled me from my reverie. It was time for training. The Shadow Armory was on the 5th basement level, a vast space with a 30-meter-high ceiling. The walls were covered with strange weapons, not swords, knives, or guns, but implements specially designed for creatures like me. Vesper Mara was waiting for me there, her face expressionless like a death mask. Beside her stood Sep Grim, holding a small metal box and grinning maliciously. "Welcome to training," Vesper said. "You will learn 3 basic techniques every intern needs to know." She led me to a metal table etched with the images of weeping children. On the table were 3 items: a small box containing white powder, a vial of crimson fluid, and a black mirror. "The first technique, bone grafting," Vesper began to explain. "You will detach a portion of bone from your body and transform it into tendrils to extend your reach." She instructed me to place my hand on the table and focus on detaching my finger bones. The initial sensation was like someone pulling each bone segment from my flesh, but then I saw steel wire strong bone threads sprout from my fingertips, bending and moving at will. Good, Vesper nodded. The second technique, blood circle weaving. She taught me how to use the red fluid, the serum of fear, to draw symbols on the floor. When drawn correctly, these symbols created illusions, causing the victim to see the most terrifying images from their subconscious. And finally, the dual shadow weaving technique. This was the most complex technique. I had to learn to separate my shadow into two independent layers, creating the effect of two of my shadows existing simultaneously in one space. This helped enhance presence and generate more fear. After 3 hours of practice, I had mastered all three techniques. The root borer in my chest continuously emitted small beeps, recording every skill I learned. Now we will test them. Vesper led me to a large screen hanging on the wall. The screen displayed a complex interface called the Complex Fear Unit Scanner. It was a system developed based on 178 years of psychological and neurological research. This system not only measured fear, but also analyzed its quality and purity. I saw different colored bar graphs, each color corresponding to a type of fear and having different point values. Crimson, fear of death, 15 points per unit. Orange, fear of loneliness, 12 points per unit. Yellow, fear of darkness, 8 points per unit. Green, fear of deformity, 10 points per unit. Blue, fear of pain, 7 points per unit. Purple, unknown fear, 20 points per unit. The system also calculated bonuses based on age and purity. Infants, multiplier x3. Children under 10, multiplier x2. Primal fear, unaffected by experience, multiplier x15, Vesper explained. I looked at my score, 0-100. Next to it was Sep Grim, 37-100. Below his name was a detailed breakdown: thanatophobia from the elderly, 15 points. Autophobia from children, 12x2 equals 24 points. Bonus psychological breakdown, 8 points. This system is directly connected to the auditor, Vesper continued. Every time you collect fear, 70% goes to the auditor, 20% is used to maintain the tower's operations, and the remaining 10% counts towards your personal score. This means that to reach 100 points, I actually had to collect 1,000 fear points. A colossal number for a new intern like me. So disappointing, Sep sneered. I've got 37 points and you're still at 0. Last week, I had an old man so paranoid he sawed off his own leg. 10 points from just one night. He showed off the badge on his coat, a small bronze skull with marrow thread etched on it. This is a bronze-level badge, Sep said. When you can do what I do, maybe you'll get one. Vesper observed the exchange with interest. I have a proposal, she said. A small wager. Whoever reaches 100 points first will be appointed shadow manager, a position with a high salary and special privileges. And the loser, I asked, will be recycled into raw material, she replied casually, meaning completely decomposed to be used as material for new interns. Sep laughed loudly. Do you accept, newbie? I looked into his eyes and saw cruelty and arrogance. I accept. Excellent, Vesper clapped her hands. The wager starts now. You both have 27 days to complete it. After the training session ended, I decided to explore the building. Using the newly learned shadow folding technique, I sneaked through the corridors. I found the surveillance room on the 12th floor. It was a circular room with hundreds of small screens arranged in an arc. Each screen displayed images from a camera, but these weren't ordinary cameras. They were shaped like giant eyeballs created from biotech, dangling from the ceiling by pink nerve fibers. This was the Dream Surveillance Network, the Umbral Loom's global dream monitoring network. Each eye didn't just observe, but could also penetrate human dreams. They recorded every nightmare, analyzed fear levels, and could even create situations to amplify fear. This was why the incidence of sleep disorders worldwide had increased by 340% over the past 20 years. In the center of the room was a large tank filled with black fluid, nightmare essence. Nightmare essence was extracted from millions of dreams. From this tank, hundreds of conduits ran up to the ceiling, forming a colossal circulatory system. On the wall was a gigantic world map with thousands of glowing dots. Each dot represented a collection point, a fear collection point. I realized that the Umbral Loom was present on every continent, in every country. But what caught my attention most was a chart displaying energy exports. There were conduits leading from the Umbral Loom Tower to 3 different locations. 1. Shadow Mirror Institute, Switzerland, 25% of total energy. 2. The Depth Protocol, Mariana Trench, 35% of total energy. 3. Penumbral Auditor Core, unknown location, 40% of total energy. I realized that the Umbral Loom was not an independent organization. They were part of a larger network, a global conspiracy to collect and utilize fear for purposes I couldn't yet comprehend. "What are you doing?" I turned to see Sepp Grimm standing at the door, his eyes glowing with satisfaction. "Trespassing, are we? This could get you fired immediately." "I'm just exploring," I said. "Exploring, huh?" Sepp walked closer, a small knife in his hand. "Or are you intentionally gathering information?" He didn't wait for my answer. The cold blade in his hand sliced through the air towards me. I recoiled, but not fast enough. The blade cut across my arm, leaving a deep gash. "Be more careful next time," Sepp said, then walked away, leaving me alone with my bleeding wound. I returned to my room, a small space with a metal bed and a table. I used a razor to etch another runic symbol onto my chest, a symbol meaning determination in the ancient tongue. As the razor cut through my skin and touched bone, I swore to myself that I would surpass the 100-point quota. Not because I wanted to win, but because I needed to survive to uncover the truth about the Umbral Loom. But even as I carved the rune, I couldn't forget Ophelia's question. "Are you cold, mister?" The small crack on my skin, where the runic lines intersected, began to glow with a faint blue light. It was a sign of change, of an emotion I couldn't understand. I had been a creature of shadow and fear for 20 years, but now, for the first time, I was starting to feel something else, something warm and bright. That made me more afraid than anything the Umbral Loom could do to me. But it also made me feel, for the first time in my life, truly alive. I lay down on the cold metal bed, looking up at the ceiling where images of weeping children were carved. Those images once didn't affect me, but now they made me feel restless. 18 days left. I had to collect 100 fear points, defeat Sepp Grimm, and uncover the truth about this organization. But first, I had to understand the strange emotions spreading within me. An emotion I suspected was called conscience. And I didn't know if it would save me or destroy me. On the 7th day since I started the wager with Sepp, with 23 days remaining, Vesper Morrow called me to the briefing room. The room had walls covered in black-tanned human skin, on which hung city maps with red dots marking targets. The smell of formaldehyde and dried blood wafted from the glazed tile floor. "Special assignment," Vesper said as I entered. She stood beside a hologram screen displaying images of 2 babies lying in parallel cribs. The Colgrave twins, Alice and Alara, 3 years old. I looked at the screen. The 2 babies looked identical, with pink skin and golden hair, sleeping soundly in white cribs. Their room was decorated with stuffed animals, a star-shaped nightlight, and a lullaby machine. "Why not choose infants?" I asked. 3-year-olds are a sweet spot," Vesper explained. "They have developed enough imagination to fear, but not enough reason to distinguish reality from fantasy. It's the perfect age to sow seeds of long-term fear." I looked at the screen again. The 2 babies looked identical, with pink skin and golden hair, sleeping soundly in white cribs. Their room was decorated with stuffed animals, a star-shaped nightlight, and a lullaby machine. "This is an excellent opportunity," Vesper continued. "Infants have unformed fears, meaning you can sow the purest primal fears. Each baby can give you 20 to 30 points. "Why are they so valuable?" I asked. "Because they haven't been corrupted by society," she explained. "Their fear is pure instinct, unmixed with reason or experience. That's the type of fear we value most." I felt an unsettling feeling in my stomach. The root borer in my chest emitted small beeps, reacting to my unusual emotions. "Where does this family live?" I asked. "A wooden villa in suburban Hapwood," Vesper said, pointing to the map. "Parents are at a dinner party tonight. Only a babysitter will be there. This is a perfect opportunity." She turned off the screen and looked at me with serious eyes. "Nero, this is an important mission. If you succeed, you'll gain an overwhelming lead. If you fail—" "I understand," I said. "Good. The phase shift door will open at 11:30 p.m. You have 3 hours to complete the mission." 2 hours later, I stood before the phase shift door, preparing for the new mission. This time, I was more proficient in using my newly learned skills. My finger bones were ready to split into root-like tendrils, and I had already drawn a small blood circle on my palm. The phase shift door opened, and I stepped into the familiar colossal mouth. The displacement process was still as horrifying as before, the sensation of being torn apart and reassembled, but I was more accustomed to it now. When I materialized, I found myself under a bed in a completely different room. The air smelled of baby powder and milk, a sweet scent I wasn't used to. Through the gap in the bed, I saw the faint light of a dolphin-shaped nightlight casting onto the ceiling. I contracted my body into a black smoke-like form and crawled out from under the bed. The room was larger than I expected, with 2 cribs placed side by side near the window. The lullaby machine was broken, emitting only an annoying creak. The dolphin-shaped nightlight flickered erratically, casting strange shadows on the walls. The babysitter, a teenage girl, was dozing on the sofa in the living room. I could hear her faint snores through the door. I approached the 2 cribs. Alice and Alara were sleeping soundly, breathing steadily. In the faint light, I clearly saw their faces, delicate, perfect, innocent features. Something within me instinctively stirred at the sight of them. I shook my head, trying to focus on the mission. Using dual shadow weaving, I created 2 pairs of red eyes under each crib. They glistened in the dark like rubies. Alice, the baby on the left, woke up first. When she saw the red eyes, she began to scream. Her cries were like needles piercing my ears, but at the same time, the root borer in my chest began to collect fear. But Alara, the baby on the right, didn't cry. Instead, she just lay still, looking at the red eyes with curiosity. Her blue eyes sparkled in the faint light, and I saw something familiar in them, the same innocence I had seen in Ophelia. I decided to intensify my approach, using bone grafting. I let small bone threads from my fingers slither down into the crib and gently touch Alara's soul. And then something strange happened. Instead of fear, Alara giggled. Her tiny foot wiggled as if being tickled. In that moment, I felt a warm feeling spread through my chest, the same feeling I had experienced with Ophelia. But then something else occurred. The fabric of reality around us suddenly cracked like breaking glass. Black cracks radiated from Alara's crib, creating a dark, swirling vortex. Alara vanished from the crib, sucked into a shadow displacement chamber, another dimension I had never known existed. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. Immediately, emergency alarms blared throughout the building. Red lights flashed, and I heard footsteps running from downstairs. I had no choice. I had to follow Alara into the displacement chamber. I plunged into the black vortex, feeling as if I was falling down a bottomless pit. Around me were blurred images of different dimensions. Cities turned upside down, inverted forests, seas of fire. Finally, I landed on a hard surface. I found myself in a sealed vault, dozens of kilometers underground. The walls were built from thousands of fossilized whale bones. Black fluid flowed in transparent glass tubes, making a sound like a heartbeat. This was the Nightmare Blood Repository, a part of the Umbral Loom I had never known existed. I found Alara in a metal crib in the center of the vault. The baby was still alive, but around the crib were small metal tubes preparing to connect to her body. "Well, well, well," a voice echoed from a dark corner. "A new intern, are we?" I turned to see a strange creature crawling towards me. It had once been an old intern, but now it was transformed. Its body was covered in nerve-like tendrils that grew from its pores and connected to the conduit system on the walls. Its mouth constantly spewed black ink to feed the pipelines. "I am Marcus," it said, its voice distorted by the nerves growing through its larynx. "Been here for 3 years. You'll end up like me too." "What happened to you?" I asked. "Didn't meet quota," Marcus sneered. "Instead of being recycled, they turned me into part of the system. Now I'm a living nightmare ink producer." I looked around and saw dozens of other creatures like Marcus. All were old interns, transformed. They were planted into the walls like trees, nourishing the system with their own bodily fluids. "And this baby?" I asked, pointing to Alara. "Experimental subject," Marcus explained. "They'll nurture this baby with pure fear, causing her to develop into a human-shadow hybrid. These hybrids can produce 10 times more fear than a regular intern." I felt rage. They weren't just harvesting fear from humans, they were transforming innocent children into fear-producing machines. "Is there a way out of here?" I asked. "No," Marcus shook his head. "Only one way in, no way out. You'll have to wait for the security team to come and get you." But I wasn't going to wait. I used dual shadow weaving to create illusory images, making the sensors believe I was in multiple places at once. Then, I used bone grafting to create small hooks that latched onto the conduit system on the ceiling. I climbed up, holding Alara in my arms. The baby was still sleeping soundly, unaware of where she was. But then I heard footsteps running from above. The Umbral Loom's security team had found us. Shadow Guard soldiers appeared from the vault door. They were 2-meter-tall creatures in black rubber suits, their teeth like iron needles. They moved with lightning speed, their eyes glowing red in the dark. Intern 847, one of them said in a robotic voice. Return the experimental subject and surrender. No, I replied. They lunged at me. I used Alara as a human shield, a disgusting act that I hated myself for doing. But I knew they wouldn't dare harm the baby. Back off, I said, or the baby gets hurt. The Shadow Guard soldiers stopped, looking at each other in confusion. I used this opportunity to escape the vault, but before leaving, I did something I knew would cause me trouble. I placed a fear imprint on Alara, not to harm the baby, but to protect her from future experiments. This imprint would cause all other shadow creatures to instinctively shy away from her. I returned Alara to her crib, quickly escaping the house before the babysitter woke up. On my way back, I saw Alice had fallen back asleep but was still whimpering in her dreams. When I returned to the Umbral Loom, Sepp Grimm was waiting for me in the orientation room, his face filled with amusement. Heard you had an interesting night, he said. Lost an experimental subject, trespassed in a restricted area, and even threatened the security team. I brought the baby back, I said. But you've severely violated regulations, Sepp laughed. Vesper Morrow has made her decision. This is your final warning. One more violation and you'll be recycled immediately. I looked at the score screen. I had 5 points from Alice, but it was still a long way from the goal. Meanwhile, Sepp had 52 points. Don't worry, he said when he saw me looking at the screen. You won't have to endure much longer. I returned to my room, exhausted and desperate. But even in despair, I felt satisfied that I had protected Alara. I looked in the mirror, seeing the runic lines on my skin fading. It was a sign of internal change. I was no longer a pure creature of fear. I had become something else. But what? I had only 26 days left to find the answer, and I knew that answer would decide not only my fate, but also the fate of all other innocent children. I extracted a small amount of fear from myself, a painful but necessary process to make up for the quota. The root borer in my chest groaned as it sucked the fear fluid from my auxiliary heart. 10 points. Still 90 points left. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never allow another child to be harmed, even if it cost me my life. That was the oath I etched into my spine with a razor, so it would remain forever in my bone marrow. The oath of a demon who had learned to love. I awoke at 3:33 a.m. on the 10th day, with 20 days remaining, to a scream that tore through the air. Not a human scream, but the shriek of bending metal, of raw flesh tearing. The sound echoed throughout the intern floor like the dying cry of a monster. I ran out into the corridor, seeing other interns also gathered, their faces filled with anxiety. Sepp Grimm stood in the middle of the corridor, but he looked completely different from yesterday. His face was covered in deep scratches from his forehead to his chin, as if someone had used steel claws to tear at his flesh. Black blood flowed from the wounds, but it wasn't normal blood. It was a viscous fluid that smelled of oxidized metal. His eyes were wide open, staring into empty space, pupils contracted to tiny pinpricks. They're talking, Sepp mumbled, his voice hoarse like sandpaper. They're talking in my head, the auditor is coming. He suddenly turned to me and I saw something horrifying. The scratches on his face weren't just ordinary wounds, they were stitched with metal thread, forming strange runic patterns. But the stitches were uneven, crooked, as if done by a trembling hand. You! Sepp pointed at me, his finger trembling uncontrollably. What did you do to the system? Why won't the whispering stop? I didn't understand what he was saying, but then I saw drops of black blood from his face fall onto the floor, and each drop created tiny hologram images. Horrifying glimpses of experiments, of transformed children, of an entity called the Penumbral Auditor. Sepp, I said carefully, do you need help? He let out a laugh, a maniacal cackle. Help? You think you can help me? You can't even complete a simple mission. Sepp drew a bone saw, a weapon forged from the spine of an ancient creature, its teeth sharp as a razor. He lunged at me with incredible speed. I recoiled, but not fast enough. The saw blade grazed my chest, tearing through my shirt and the runic skin beneath. Black fluid flowed from the wound, but instead of pain, I felt a surge of anger. I don't want to fight you, I said. But I do. Sepp screamed and attacked again. This time I was more ready. I used bone grafting to create a small shield from my finger bones, blocking the saw blade. But the force of the blow was too strong, causing us both to lose our balance and tumble over the corridor railing. We fell onto the autopsy room floor on the floor below. I heard the sound of cracking bones, unsure if it was mine or Sep's. A sharp pain spread through my body as I hit a metal operating table. But we didn't stop there. The autopsy room floor also couldn't withstand the weight, and we continued to fall to an even lower level. This time we landed in a completely different space. The air smelled of old paper, dried ink, and something sickly sweet. I looked around and realized I was in a library, but not an ordinary library. The bookshelves were made of the rib cages of ancient sea creatures, towering to the ceiling. The books weren't paper, but tanned human skin, etched with letters in blood. A spiral staircase was made from a colossal spine, each vertebra as large as a car tire. "The Library of Hyperdreams," I whispered, recalling rumors I had heard about this place. Sep had already gotten up, his face bloody but still maniacally laughing. "Perfect," he said. "The perfect place to finish you." He lunged at me again, but this time I didn't back down. I used dual shadow weaving to create 3 images of myself, disorienting Sep. While he hesitated, I grabbed a book from the nearest shelf and threw it at his face. The book burst into flames upon contact with his skin, creating purple flames that reeked of sulfur. "Bastard!" Sep shrieked, batting at the flames with his hands. "You dare touch the ancient texts?" He lunged at me with blind fury. The bone saw in his hand emitted a blue light, a sign of magical enhancement. I rolled to the side, dodging his attack. The saw blade cut through a bookshelf, sending hundreds of human skin books crashing to the floor. Each book, upon hitting the ground, let out a cry like a human scream. "What are you doing?" Another voice called from above. We looked up to see Valence standing on the bone staircase, her face pale with fear. She held a dictionary-sized book in her hand, its black leather cover etched with runic symbols. "Valence," I called, "help me stop Sep, he's gone mad." But Sep had spotted an opportunity. He climbed the bookshelves with monkey-like speed, the bone saw slicing through the air towards Valence. "No!" I screamed. I used bone grafting to create a long hook, throwing it up to snag Sep's leg. He lost his balance and fell. But as he fell, he managed to grab Valence, pulling her down with him. Both fell to the floor with a loud thud. Valence was pinned beneath Sep, her mouth bleeding, but she still clutched the book in her hand. "Balance blueprint," Valence said with difficulty. "I found it." Sep got up, looking at the book with eager eyes. "Give it to me," he said. "I need to know the truth." "No," Valence shook her head. "You mustn't read this, it will kill you." "I've been dead for a long time," Sep sneered. "Ever since the day I signed the contract with the Umbral Loom." He snatched the book from Valence's hands. As soon as his fingers touched the cover, the runic lines on his face began to glow as if burning. I caught a glimpse of the pages as Sep opened it. I saw complex diagrams of the link between the Umbral Loom and an entity called the Penumbral Auditor. The Auditor provided mathematical formulas to balance emotional entropy in exchange for a compressed source of fear. "This is the truth," Sep whispered, his voice filled with astonishment. "We're not interns, we're living batteries." Valence tried to get up, but her leg was broken. "Nero," she said, "you have to stop Sep from reading further. The last page contains instructions on how to directly contact the Auditor." But it was too late. Sep had already turned to the last page. As his eyes read the final lines, his entire body began to convulse. "I understand," he said, his voice no longer his own. "I understand why the whispering won't stop." Sep stood up, but his movements were like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. He walked towards a dark corner of the library where a colossal microphone system stood. "The Nightmare Audition Chamber," Valence whispered, "where all the screams from missions are collected." Sep attached a small microphone to his heart. Immediately, the system activated and began to suck all the bodily fluids from him. "Sep!" I screamed, running towards him. But it was too late. Sep's body began to shrivel, his flesh drying out until only a strip of dried blood remained, hanging from the ceiling. From that ribbon, Sep's voice echoed one last time, "The Auditor will come and will kill everyone. Only humanity can save us." Sep threw something onto the floor before completely dissolving. It was a small compass made of bone, its needle spinning continuously as if searching for something. I picked up the compass. It was burning hot in my hand, and I felt it pointing in a specific direction, towards where Ophelia lived. "The shadow compass," Valence said with difficulty. It will lead you to those who can be saved. Saved from what? I asked. From what the Auditor is about to do, she replied. He will suck all the fear from this world, not just from the interns, but from all humans. When that happens, humanity will become emotionless zombies. I looked around the crumbling library. Many bookshelves had toppled. The Balance Blueprint book was burning to ashes. The secrets I needed to know were disappearing before my eyes. What should I do? I asked Valence. Find the children, she said. They are the key. Their pure fear can destroy the Auditor system. Valence tried to stand but failed. I can't go with you, she said, but I can give you something. She ripped open her shirt, extracting a small metal module from inside her body. Master security key, she explained. It will help you enter restricted areas. I took the module, feeling it burning hot like a live coal. Why are you helping me? Because I was a child once too, Valence smiled, tears streaming from her metallic eye. And I remember what it felt like to be cared for. I used shadow folding to escape the library before it completely collapsed. In my hand were the bone compass and the security module, the only two items left from this horrific battle. When I returned to my room, I looked in the mirror and saw a completely different creature. The runic lines on my skin no longer glowed blue but a warm yellow. It was a sign of a profound change in my nature. I was no longer just a fear-collecting intern. I had become something new, an entity that could feel both fear and hope. The bone compass in my hand pointed directly towards Ophelia's house. I knew I had to go there, not to harm the child, but to protect her from what was to come. The Auditor was coming, and I might be the only one who could stop him. But first, I had to learn how to use my new power, the power of humanity. I looked up at the ceiling, where a small bloodstain from Sepp Grimm still remained. In that bloodstain, I saw the last images from his memory, a colossal entity with 8 ears and 4 jaws, awakening somewhere deep underground, the Penumbral Auditor. And he knew of my existence. The real war was about to begin, and I had only one weapon, a heart learning to love. I hoped it would be strong enough. Day 12, 18 days left. Rasmus Blackthorne, the Deputy General Director of the Umbral Loom, had the form of a colossal bone stilt. His body was nearly 3 meters tall, composed of bone segments connected by blue sinews. A clamshell mask covered his face, revealing only eyes like 2 deep hollows filled with red light. He was chairing an emergency meeting in the council room, a hemispherical space with walls made of human skulls. On the gigantic heart-shaped conference table, hologram screens displayed alarming reports. Ophelia Duran has remembered the face of the shadow entity, Rasmus said, his voice like scraping metal. The girl recounted in detail to her psychiatrist about the cold shadow man under her bed. Worse, her latent psychic abilities are awakening. She has begun to see things she shouldn't. Vesper Morrow sat to the right of the conference table, her face expressionless. The situation is very serious, she said. If this girl tells her story to more people, we could be exposed. The solution is clear. Rasmus tapped his bony finger on the table. Rapid memory erasure. Scrape clean all memories of the shadow entity and implant sleepwalking syndrome into the child. I was hiding in the ventilation system above, hearing every word. The root borer in my chest emitted warning beeps as it sensed the tension. Sleepwalking syndrome? Vesper asked. A state where the child will automatically wander at night, Rasmus explained, during which we will collect fear from her without any interns, a far more efficient solution. I felt a surge of anger within me. The runic cracks on my skin began to spread, glowing with a warm yellow. It was a sign of a profound change in my nature, from a creature of fear to something else. When will this be carried out? Vesper asked. Tonight, Rasmus stood up. The Shadow Medic team will infiltrate the girl's house at 2:00 a.m. I couldn't let this happen. In my mind, the image of Ophelia's innocent eyes and her question, "Are you cold, mister?" kept resurfacing. For the first time in my life, someone had cared about me, and I wouldn't let them harm that child. I left the conference room undetected. Returning to my room, I pulled out the intern contract from my locker. With razor-sharp claws, I tore the contract in two. Immediately, the punishment chip in my spine activated. A hologram projection appeared before me, a horrifying image of death with the words in red, "Death sentence, breach of contract." But I didn't care. I had made my decision. I used the security module Valence had given me to hack into the phase shift system. Instead of going through the official phase shift door, I created a temporary tunnel directly to Ophelia's house. When I appeared under her bed, I saw the child tossing and turning in her sleep. Ophelia lay curled up, clutching her teddy bear, her small forehead covered in cold sweat. She was having a nightmare. "The cold shadow man," Ophelia mumbled in her sleep. "Don't go, don't let them harm you." I realized that her nightmares weren't about me, but about me being harmed. She was worried about me. That made the runic cracks on my skin glow even brighter. I created a shadow cocoon, a silent, soundproof pod by folding layers of darkness together. Then I gently lifted Ophelia from her bed. She woke up, but when she saw me, she wasn't scared. "The cold shadow man," she said softly. "You're back." "We have to go, Ophelia," I said. "There are bad people who want to hurt you." She nodded, trusting me completely. I carried her and slipped through the floor into the Lacoon tube system, a network of living flesh labyrinths spread across the entire city that no one knew existed. The Lacoon tube system was one of the Umbral Loom's darkest secrets. These were tunnels made of intestines and living flesh, running deep underground, connecting all areas of the city. The intestinal walls were flushed pink, warm and wet, beating with a slow, steady heart rhythm. I led Ophelia into the labyrinth. She hugged her teddy bear tightly and looked around with more curiosity than fear. "Where are we, Uncle?" Ophelia asked. "This is a safe place," I replied. "The bad people can't find us here." The air in the labyrinth was heavy and metallic smelling. Pink slimy fluid flowed in small channels on the walls, creating a sound like soft breathing. In some places, I saw strange creatures eating drops of fear leaking from the system above. They looked like small caterpillars with translucent wings hovering in the air. The labyrinth had dozens of different turns, forming a complex network. I used my bone grafting ability to reconfigure my finger bones into a braille map, helping me navigate in the dark. "Are you cold, Uncle?" Ophelia asked when she saw me shiver. "No," I said. "I'm just feeling something I've never felt before." "What is it?" "I think it's worry," I replied. "I'm worried about you." Ophelia smiled, and that smile was like a ray of light in the darkness. "I'm worried about you too, Uncle. The people in my dreams said they want to hurt you." I stopped. "The people in your dreams?" Ophelia nodded. "There's a lady with saw teeth, a man as tall as a bamboo, and a machine man with a clamshell mask. They said they would catch you and turn you into something else." I immediately understood. Ophelia's dreams had been infiltrated by the Umbral Loom. They had tried to collect fear from her by creating terrifying images of me. But instead of fear, she felt worry and wanted to protect me. "I won't let them harm you," I said. "I promise." We continued deeper into the labyrinth. I felt safer the farther we got from the surface. But then I heard footsteps running behind us, the sound of metal scraping against wet flesh. "They found us," I whispered. Vesper Morrow and the Shadow SWAT team had infiltrated the labyrinth. They used special guns that fired memory crystal bullets. When they hit a victim, they would be frozen in a single moment of their life forever. Intern 847. Vesper's voice echoed in the labyrinth. "Return the experimental subject and surrender, you're only making things worse." Experimental subject? I felt a surge of anger. This child is not an experimental subject. I grabbed Ophelia and ran deeper into the labyrinth, searching for a safe place. But the labyrinth was complex, and I didn't know the way out. "Uncle," Ophelia said softly, "I can help you." "How can you help?" "I can talk to this," she said, placing her hand on the living flesh wall. "It's talking to me." I realized that Ophelia possessed a special ability I had never seen. She could communicate with the Umbral Loom's biological system. That was why she was so important. "What does it say?" I asked. "It says there's a safe place." Ophelia pointed towards a dark turn. "But we have to go through the dangerous chamber." I had no other choice. We ran into that turn, and I found myself in a gigantic chamber, the labyrinth's respiratory chamber. The air here was thick, with the smell of toxic gas. The Shadow SWAT team followed us into the chamber. They wore protective suits, but I knew that the toxic gas here could corrode even metal. "Ophelia," I said, "can you tell this chamber to breathe harder?" She placed her hand on the wall and whispered something. Immediately, the respiratory chamber contracted more forcefully, expelling a large amount of toxic gas. The Shadow SWAT team's protective gear began to melt. Their lungs were corroded. "Run!" I carried Ophelia and fled the chamber before we were also affected. We escaped the respiratory chamber and went deeper into the labyrinth. But then I felt a horrifying sensation. The punishment chip in my spine began to activate. Small electric spikes pierced from the chip into my bone marrow. The pain was like fire burning through every nerve. My blood vessels burst, black blood oozing from my pores. "Uncle!" Ophelia shrieked as she saw me fall. I felt like I was dying. The punishment chip was designed to kill any intern who dared to betray. But then Ophelia did something I didn't expect. She took the small blanket from her teddy bear, wrapped it around me, and hugged me tightly. Her tears flowed and touched my skin, and a miracle happened. Her tears mingled with the electric fluid from the chip, creating a temporary chemical reaction that halted the chip's operation. "Does it hurt, Uncle?" Ophelia asked, her voice trembling. "It's okay," I said with difficulty. "I'm fine." But I knew this state was only temporary. The chip would reactivate soon. I needed to find a way to disable it completely. "Uncle," Ophelia said softly, "I can feel something bad inside you. Can I take it out?" I looked into her innocent eyes and realized that she not only had the ability to communicate with biological systems, but she could also perceive and influence emotional energy, what the Umbral Loom called the power of childish hope. This was why shadow entities like me wanted to protect children. Not because we wanted to harm them, but because they possessed the power that could save us. "Yes," I said. "You can help me." Ophelia placed her hand on my back, precisely where the punishment chip was located. I felt a warm current spread from her hand, piercing through my flesh and reaching my spine. The chip began to melt, turning into metallic fluid that flowed out. "It's done," Ophelia smiled. "You're free now." I stood up, feeling a relief I had never known. For the first time since signing the contract, I was truly free. No more punishment chip, no more contract, no longer bound by the Umbral Loom. "Thank you," I said. "You're welcome," Ophelia said. "You protected me, now let me protect you." We continued deeper into the labyrinth, searching for a safe exit. I knew that the Umbral Loom wouldn't stop. They would continue to hunt us. But now I had an ally, a child with the power to counteract the shadow system. "Uncle," Ophelia asked as we walked, "why do they want to harm you?" "Because I've changed," I replied. "I'm no longer what they want me to be." "What have you changed into?" I thought for a moment. "I think I've changed into someone who can love." Ophelia nodded as if that made perfect sense. "So, do you love me, Uncle?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I love you." And as I said that, I felt the runic lines on my skin glow brighter than ever before. Not the light of fear, but the light of hope. I had become the one thing the Umbral Loom feared most, a shadow creature with a conscience. And I would use this new power to protect all other children like Ophelia. We walked for about an hour in the Lacoon labyrinth when I heard strange footsteps ahead. Not the footsteps of the Shadow SWAT team, but someone trying to walk silently. I held Ophelia tightly, preparing for another confrontation. "Near," a familiar voice echoed from the shadows. "It's me." Valence stepped out from a dark corner of the labyrinth, but she looked completely different from when I last saw her. The left metallic half of her face was cracked and shattered, revealing blue nerve fibers inside. Her right arm was amputated from the elbow, replaced by a cluster of small conduits that flowed with black fluid. "Valence," I said, "what happened to you?" "I had to cut myself to get this out," she said, holding up a small metal module the size of her thumb. The module glowed red. On its surface were etched moving runic characters. "This is the advanced master security key." It was deep within my biological system. I looked at her bleeding wound. "Why did you harm yourself?" "Because I hate what they did to me," Valence said, her voice filled with pain. "They turned me into an experiment when I was just 12. I've had to live as a cyborg hybrid for the past 10 years. Ophelia looked at Valence with sympathetic eyes. "Does it hurt, sister?" "Always," Valence smiled sadly. "But now I have a chance for revenge, and I will help you." "Help us do what?" I asked. "Get into the core," Valence said, "where the Umbral Loom's true heart beats. If we can destroy it, the entire system will collapse." She led us through a complex network of tunnels, finally reaching a colossal metal wall. This was the entrance to the core, a 3-layered defensive structure. The first layer was a 3-meter thick reinforced concrete wall, fortified with metallic nerve fibers. The second layer was a 30-meter deep moat filled with living ink, a black liquid that could corrode anything it touched. The third layer was the Titan heart door, beating steadily 60 beats per minute. "How can we get in?" I asked. "I'll hack the biological system," Valence said. She removed a piece from her metallic arm, revealing small sensors underneath. "I'll cover the bloodprint sensor with my own skin." Valence placed the piece of skin on the sensor. Immediately, the system began to scan. I saw red laser beams run across her skin, reading DNA and biometric information. Access granted, a robotic voice announced. Valence Morrison, Senior Technical Assistant. The Titan door began to open, revealing a vast space within. We stepped inside, and I was immediately overwhelmed. The core was a colossal spherical space, taller than a 10-story building. In the center was the machine heart, a biomechanical structure with 12 heart chambers, each containing a giant piston crushing fear into small capsules. The elevator system was made of lung tissue, expanding and contracting with each breath. Spiral staircases around the center were made of thick blood vessels, like ropes. The air smelled of ozone mixed with metal, making me feel nauseous. This is where all fear is converted into energy, Valence explained. Every day, they process millions of units of fear from all over the world. Ophelia looked up at the machine heart with fearful eyes. It looks like a monster. It is the monster, I said. Suddenly, a roar echoed from above. A colossal creature jumped down from the ceiling, landing right in front of us. It was Gorgon Baron, the core overseer. Gorgon had the body of a giant goat, but his 2 hind legs were mechanical, with gears and pistons. His head was as big as a barrel, his eyes were red flickering LED chips, and his mouth was filled with rotating metal teeth like chainsaws. "Rebel interns," Gorgon said in a voice like a grinding machine, "and 2 accomplices. You have violated the highest restricted area. We're here to stop you," I said. "Stop me?" Gorgon laughed, his laughter like clashing metal. "Do you think you can stop this perfect machine?" He lunged at us with incredible speed. I pushed Ophelia aside and used bone grafting to create long bone hooks. I threw these hooks onto the turbines above, pulling myself high. Gorgon jumped after me, his machine legs generating electric sparks as they hit the metal. He swung his cleaver-like claws at me. I swayed to the side, but his claws cut through one of the bone cables I was using to hang. I fell, landing directly on one of the spinning turbines. My back hit the metal blade, black blood splattering everywhere, but I didn't let go. Instead, I wrapped my bone roots around the turbine's shaft, pulling Gorgon along. "No!" Gorgon shrieked as he was dragged into the turbine. His machine legs were crushed, oil and blood flying everywhere. But he was still alive, still trying to attack me with his claws. "Valence!" I screamed. "Do something!" Valence ran to the main control panel, but when she saw piston number 7 jammed, she knew there was only one way to fix it. "I'm sorry," Valence said, looking at me with determined eyes. "This is the only way." She crawled into piston number 7, inside the machine that was crushing fear. Immediately, the colossal gears began to turn, crushing her body. "Valence!" Ophelia and I screamed in unison. Valence's blood and fragments of skin sprayed out, covering the surrounding conduits. But her death was not in vain. When her blood touched the system, it activated an emergency cellular code, a command embedded in her DNA since she was an experiment. All admin interfaces in the central core lit up. The screen displayed, "Admin access unlocked." I ran to the main screen, ignoring Gorgon groaning in the turbine. I found a special file in the system, a file named Original Contract. "What is this?" I asked. Ophelia came to me, placing her hand on the screen. "It's talking to me, Uncle," she said. "It says this is the origin of everything." I downloaded the file. It appeared as a glowing biological block containing a runic inscription combined with DNA. As Ophelia held the file, we heard the synchronized cries of thousands of children. "What is this?" I asked. "This is the first contract," Ophelia said, her voice filled with sorrow. "The contract between the Umbral Loom and the Auditor. It says all interns will become permanent slaves." I read the file's contents. It was a horrifying agreement. The Umbral Loom agreed to provide infinite fear to the Auditor. In return, the Auditor would provide technology to transform humans into fear-producing machines. "We have to destroy it," I said. "But how?" Ophelia asked. I looked around the central core, seeing dozens of conduits running from the machine heart up to the ceiling. If I could destroy the machine heart, the entire system would collapse. "Ophelia," I said, "can you talk to the machine heart?" "Yes," she nodded, "but it hurts a lot. It doesn't want to live like this." "Then we will free it." Ophelia placed her hand on the machine heart. Immediately, all 12 heart chambers began to beat faster. The pistons stopped operating. The conduits began to crack. "It says thank you," Ophelia said, tears streaming down her face. "It wanted to die a long time ago." The machine heart began to fail, the heart chambers cracked and shattered, black fluid flowing everywhere. the entire structure began to shake. "We have to go." I grabbed Ophelia, the original contract file still clutched in her hand. We ran from the central core as it collapsed. I heard Gorgon's final groan from the turbine and the machine heart's last gasp. When we escaped the Lacoon labyrinth, I looked back to see the entire system collapsing. Conduits exploded, black fluid pouring everywhere. "Valence," I whispered. "She sacrificed herself to save us." "She is free now," Ophelia said. "She no longer hurts." I looked at the original contract file in Ophelia's hand. This was proof of the Umbral Loom's crimes. But I knew that destroying the central core alone wasn't enough. We had to confront the auditor himself. "Uncle," Ophelia said, "I can feel something awakening, something very large and very angry." I felt a chill run down my spine. The Penumbral Auditor knew what we did, and he was coming for revenge. "We must prepare," I said. "The real war is about to begin." Ophelia nodded. The original contract file glowed in her hand like a torch of hope in the darkness. We had destroyed the heart of the Umbral Loom, but now we had to face the true darkness behind it all. And I didn't know if the love I had learned would be strong enough to defeat it. Day 16, 14 days left. As we escaped the crumbling central core, I felt the entire Umbral Loom tower shaking. Not from the collapse of the machine heart, but from something else, something larger and more terrifying awakening from deep underground. "Uncle," Ophelia said, her voice trembling, "I can hear a roar from deep below. It's coming up." I carried her and ran to the higher floors, but with every step, I felt the air grow colder. The temperature dropped to -40°C. Our breaths turned into white bone. The fear in the air was so thick I could taste metal on my tongue. We ascended to the 410th floor, the auditor's hall. This was a space I had never been allowed to enter. The 40-meter high domed ceiling was made of blackened ancient whalebones. Banners of monster-hide fabric hung from the ceiling, each etched with glowing red runic symbols. In the center of the room was a colossal horn speaker system, each speaker as large as a car. They were arranged in an octagonal shape, all facing the center, where a dais made of human bones stood. "This is where he will appear," I whispered, and as if to confirm my words, a horrifying roar echoed from deep below. The floor began to crack. The cracks spread into an octagonal pattern. Blinding blue light shot out from the cracks, carrying the smell of sulfur and ozone. The Penumbral Auditor began to rise from the depths. He was not entirely organic, nor entirely machine. His upper half was polished metal, like a mirror, reflecting nightmare images from everywhere. 8 colossal ears protruded from the sides of his head, each capable of rotating 360 degrees and listening to every sound within thousands of kilometers. His 4 jaws were made of caliper blades that could crush anything. Every time he breathed, the caliper blades opened and closed in a steady rhythm, creating a terrifying scraping metal sound. When the auditor fully emerged, I saw he was over 10 meters tall, exuding a cold current that crystallized the fear in the air into small ice shards that fell onto the dais like black snow. "Rebel intern," his voice like a cracked church bell echoed from his 8 colossal ears. "You have destroyed my work. I have freed innocent souls," I replied, placing Ophelia behind me. "Innocent?" The auditor laughed, his laughter like breaking steel. "Nothing is innocent in this world. All have fear, and I will collect it all." He pointed at Ophelia. "That child has primal fear at level 0. She will provide enough energy for me to rebuild everything." "No," I said. "I won't let you touch her. Do you think you can stop me?" the auditor asked. That was when I felt the final change in my body. All the energy I had absorbed from Valence from her sacrifice began to activate. My spine began to protrude through my skin, forming a series of razor-sharp bone spikes. Auxiliary eyes grew along my spine, giving me 360-degree vision. My ribs flared out into sharp hooks, each as long as a sword. This was the ultimate form I had never achieved before. "Oh," the auditor said. "Impressive. You have evolved into a nightmare apex." Interesting, but still not enough. He unleashed the first wave of fear subtraction, a sound wave that aggregated millions of screams he had collected over the years. Each scream became a sonic blade, cutting through the air towards me. I used the shadow compass that Sepp Grimm had left behind to create an anti-sound shield. At the same time, I recalled warm memories. Ophelia's question, "Are you cold, mister?" Her smile, the feeling of being cared for the first time. These warm memories created a protective energy field that diminished the power of the fear subtraction wave. That's impossible, the auditor said, his 8 ears spinning. You're using love. I have learned that feeling, I said, and it is stronger than fear. The real battle began. The auditor used his 4-caliper jaws to attack me. I dodged by using my rib hooks to swing myself onto the ceiling. But he was faster than I expected. A caliper snapped onto my leg, crushing my thigh bone. I screamed in agony, black blood splattering everywhere. But in the pain, I saw an opportunity. I let bone roots from my fingers creep into the horn speaker system, creating a network of interference. "Caleb," I called. "If you're still there, help me." And a miracle happened. Caleb's ghost, still existing within the speaker system, began to sing an ancient Icelandic lullaby. The singing created a disorienting sound field that unbalanced the auditor. "Impossible," the auditor shrieked. "How can you use sound against me?" "Because I'm not alone," I said. "I have friends who sacrifice themselves for me." I used this opportunity to lunge towards the auditor. My rib hooks pierced his metallic body, creating cracks, but he was too strong. He used his metal hand to bat me away. My body hit the wall with a horrifying thud. "Uncle," Ophelia shrieked. I felt like I was dying, ribs broken, internal organs ruptured, blood flowing from my mouth. But when I saw Ophelia crying, I felt a new source of strength. "Ophelia," I said with difficulty, "do you remember the original contract file?" "Yes," she nodded. "Throw it into the auditor's central core." I pointed at his metallic chest. "It will free all the imprisoned souls." Ophelia understood immediately. She took the original contract file from her embrace. The file had now transformed into a glowing sphere, like a small sun. With all the strength of an 8-year-old child, she threw the file directly into the auditor's central core. As soon as the file touched him, it erupted. Thousands of apparitions of interns he had consumed over the years began to appear. They were vague shadows, but each shadow screamed with both anger and liberation. "No!" the auditor shrieked as the apparitions began to tear at his 8 ears. "They belong to me." "They never belonged to you," I said, rising with my last ounce of strength. "They were always free." The apparitions continued to attack the auditor. They tore at his metallic ears, shattering his 4-caliper jaws. With each wound, his hearing diminished. "Sep Grim," I called through the speaker system. Sep Grim's ghost generated a special sound, the sound of a lullaby I had heard Ophelia sing. It was a frequency the auditor couldn't read, the frequency of love and care. "Humanity," Sep Grim's voice said through the speakers, "is the frequency the auditor cannot analyze." The sound of the lullaby combined with the screams of the apparitions created a horrifying resonance. The auditor's 8 ears began to bleed liquid metal. He was going deaf. "Impossible," the auditor staggered, losing his ability to hear. "I am the ultimate auditor. I must hear everything." "But you cannot hear love," I said, "because you never understood it." The auditor finally lost his hearing completely, and without his primary source of power, his central core began to overload, unable to process the colossal amount of energy accumulating. "You have destroyed everything," the auditor said, his voice weak. "Now I will unleash all fear at once. This entire world will drown in eternal nightmare." He began to self-destruct, his central core swelling like a balloon, preparing to explode and release all the fear accumulated over decades. "Uncle," Ophelia said, "can I stop him?" "How?" I asked. "By imagining the best thing you can think of," she said. "And you too, Uncle." I understood immediately. We clasped hands. I imagined all the beautiful moments I had shared with Ophelia. She imagined the sunrise, her mother's smile, the feeling of safety in an embrace. The energy of hope from us created a protective field. When the auditor exploded, instead of releasing fear, our energy of hope transformed the explosion into a shower of light. Small fragments of light fell like fireworks. The auditor completely dissolved, leaving only a pool of liquid metal on the floor. "We won," I said, hugging Ophelia tightly. "Not yet," she said. "I can feel the tower collapsing. We have to get out." I looked around and saw the entire tower shaking. Without the auditor to sustain it, the tower's biostructure was slowly dying. "Let's go," I said, carrying Ophelia. "We have to get out of here before everything collapses." But as we ran towards the exit, I saw a dark shadow waiting. Vesper Morrow, half her face burned black but still alive. "You destroyed everything," she said, her voice filled with hatred. "I won't let you escape." She drew one last blade, preparing to attack, but I was no longer afraid. "Vesper," I said, "you were a child once too. You once had someone who cared." My words made her stop. In her eyes, I saw a small flicker of memory, a time before she became a monster. Yes, she said softly, I was once warm. She dropped the blade and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the collapsing tower. Come on, I said to Ophelia. We have a new life to begin. But the fight wasn't completely over. The tower was collapsing, and we had to escape before it buried us. When the Penumbral Auditor vanished, I thought everything was finished. But I was wrong. His death created a horrifying chain reaction I couldn't have predicted. All the fear energy the Auditor had accumulated for decades, millions of units of fear from all over the world, was released simultaneously. But instead of dissipating, it was sucked backward, creating a colossal shadow storm. Through the windows of the Auditor's hall, I saw the entire city had changed. The city clocks all pointed to the black hour, a non-existent hour where time and space were distorted. People on the streets weren't afraid but fell into a strange, peaceful sleep. All their fear was being drawn back into the Umbral Tower. What's happening? Ophelia asked, looking out the window. Fear is reversing, I explained. Instead of flowing out from people, it's flowing back into the tower. The tower's structure began to buckle under the pressure. The living concrete walls cracked open, revealing gigantic blood vessels that were swelling with too much fear. Darkness oozed from the tower like a giant mushroom, engulfing the entire surrounding area. We have to get out of here, I said, carrying Ophelia and running towards the emergency exit. But as we ran through the corridors, I saw a horrifying sight. All the surviving interns were deforming. Without the Auditor to control them, they became half-formed shadows, not entirely human, not entirely monster. Help us, an intern cried when he saw me. His body was melting into black smoke but still retained consciousness. We can't control it. I felt heartbroken, but I knew I couldn't help them. The auxiliary eyes along my spine shot out phantom light beams, a type of light that could suppress shadows. This temporarily stabilized them, but couldn't completely heal them. This way, I directed them towards the exit. Get out of the tower. Out there, you might have a chance. We continued running. Each functional room of the tower was distorting in a horrifying way. The autopsy room had turned into a gigantic stomach, devouring everything within. The library of hyperdreams burned down, the human skin books igniting in purple flames. Nero, Sepp Grimm's voice echoed from the remaining speaker system. You have to hurry. The tower is about to collapse completely. Caleb, I said, are you still there? Just a little longer. His voice grew weaker. I will sing you one last song. He began to sing the ancient Icelandic lullaby, the same one he had used against the Auditor. The sound created an anti-sound field that kept the half-formed shadows from approaching us. We reached a living flesh bridge connecting two buildings. The bridge was shaking violently, blood and mucus oozing from its hollows. I knew it could collapse at any moment, but this was the only way out. Uncle, Ophelia said, I'm scared. It's okay, I said, hugging her tightly. I'll protect you. We ran across the bridge. With each step, I felt it sagging. Blood from the bridge splattered onto our clothes and skin. But eventually, we made it across. Now we were on the highest floor of the tower. Through the window, I saw the entire city engulfed in darkness. The shadow storm spread like a toxic gas cloud, devouring everything in its path. What do we do? Ophelia asked. I looked down at the center of the tower where the machine heart had once beaten. Now it was a bottomless black hole. From there, all the darkness was welling up. I realized there was only one way to stop the shadow storm. Ophelia, I said, I have to jump down there. No, she shrieked. You'll die. I have to, I explained. I'm a shadow creature. I can absorb all that energy and prevent it from spreading. What about me? Ophelia cried. You will live, I said. You will go back to your mother and live a normal life. I hugged Ophelia one last time. She felt warm in my arms, and I knew this was something I would remember forever. I love you, Uncle, I said. I love you too, she said, tears streaming down. I jumped into the black hole, holding Ophelia in my arms. We fell through floors of the tower, through crumbling rooms, through corridors filled with darkness. As we neared the center, I began to absorb all the shadow energy. It felt like millions of needles piercing my body at once, but I endured it because I knew it was necessary. Uncle, Ophelia said, you're glowing. I looked down to see my skeleton emitting a warm yellow light. This was not the light of fear, but the light of hope. This light enveloped both of us, creating a protective aura. When we reached the center of the shadow storm, a miracle happened. Instead of being swallowed, all the darkness around us was reflected. The shadow storm reversed, turning into rays of light that shot out everywhere like fireworks. Look, Ophelia pointed at the ceiling, where a small crack revealed outside light. Through the crack, I saw the sky brightening. Dawn was coming, and with it, new hope. The tower began to collapse completely, but instead of collapsing in horror, it dissipated in light. The living concrete walls turned into silver dust, flying up into the sky like glittering particles. "Will we be okay?" Ophelia asked. "We'll be okay," I said, hugging her tightly. The aura of hope surrounded us, protecting us from the collapse. We ascended, passing through the disintegrating layers of the building, and emerged into the light of dawn. When we landed on the ground, I saw the city had returned to normal. People began to wake from their strange sleep, looking up at the sky where the Umbral Loom tower had once stood. Now, only a beautiful silver cloud remained, reflecting the sunlight. "Is it over?" I asked. "No," Ophelia smiled. "It's just beginning," she said. She was right. This wasn't the end, but the beginning of a new life, a life where I would learn how to be human. But first, I had to take Ophelia home to her mother, who was undoubtedly worried sick. "Uncle," Ophelia said as we walked, "you won't disappear, will you?" "No," I said. "I'll always be near you, maybe not under your bed, but I'll always be there when you need me. Promise?" "Promise." And as we walked towards the sunrise, I knew this was a promise I would keep forever. Darkness had been defeated, not by power, but by love. And I, a creature born of fear, had learned to bring hope. This was the final lesson I needed to learn. And perhaps it was also the most important lesson. As the darkness dissipated, the light of dawn illuminated the city. And in that light, I saw not just the end of a nightmare, but the beginning of a beautiful dream. A dream of hope, of love, and of how even the darkest creatures can find light within themselves. 6:06 a.m., the moment I would never forget. The Umbral Loom tower completely collapsed. The last living concrete blocks turned into sparkling silver dust, floating in the morning breeze. For the first time in decades, sunlight shone directly onto the area the tower had once overshadowed. Pink rays of dawn pierced through the thin haze, creating tiny diamond-like specks of light that fell to the ground. I sat amidst the rubble, holding Ophelia in my arms. She had fallen asleep after the horrific adventure, a peaceful smile on her small face. In her sleep, she mumbled, "Warm shadow man, you're home." Suddenly, I saw brilliant streaks of light begin to ascend from the rubble. These were the souls of those who had sacrificed themselves. Valence, Sepp Grimm, and hundreds of other interns the Umbral Loom had consumed over the years. Valence's soul appeared first. She was no longer a cyborg hybrid, but a young girl with brown hair and a bright smile. She waved at me, her lips mouthing, "Thank you." Then came Sepp Grimm. He too had completely changed, no longer the cruel creature, but a young man with sad yet relieved eyes. He bowed to me respectfully. "You showed me the way." Hundreds of other souls also ascended. Each had their own story, but all were liberated. They dissolved into constellations, soaring into the sky and falling down like stardust, tiny drops of light carrying gratitude and forgiveness. "Brother, we did it!" Sepp Grimm's voice echoed one last time before completely fading. "You saved all of us." When all the souls had departed, I felt a change within myself. The runic lines on my skin no longer glowed the blue of fear, but the warm yellow of hope. My skin was softer. The sharp bone spikes receded, leaving only small scars like marks of the past. My eyes could still see darkness, but now they could also see light. And more importantly, I could see the beauty of the world, something I had never noticed before. "Ophelia," I gently shook her. "Wake up, I have to take you home." She opened her eyes and looked up at me with clear blue eyes. "You look different, uncle," she said. "You're not cold anymore." "No," I smiled. "I have learned to be warm." We stood up and walked towards Ophelia's house. Along the way, I saw the city had returned to normal. People began to emerge, looking up at the sky where the Umbral Loom tower had once stood, with curiosity and relief. They didn't remember exactly what had happened, but all felt as if a long nightmare had ended. When we arrived at Ophelia's house, I saw her mother standing on the porch, her eyes red from crying. She had been awake all night, worried sick about her daughter. "Ophelia!" she shrieked when she saw her daughter and ran to embrace her. "Where did you go? I was worried to death." "I went on an adventure with the warm shadow man," Ophelia said, pointing at me. Her mother looked at me with suspicion. In the daylight, I still looked different, tall, pale-skinned, with strange scars. But my eyes were no longer terrifying. Instead, they exuded gentleness and kindness. "Thank you," her mother said. "Thank you for bringing my daughter home safely." "You're welcome," I replied. "Ophelia is a special child and you should be proud of her." I knelt down to Ophelia's eye level. Do you remember my promise? I'll always be near you. She nodded. But not under your bed, right? That's right, I smiled. I'll be in the light, protecting your sleep and the sleep of all other children. I kissed Ophelia's forehead and she giggled. You're so warm, uncle, she said. Now I don't have to worry about you being cold anymore. No, I stood up. I'll never be cold again. 2 months later, the world had changed in ways most people couldn't recognize. The destruction of the Umbral Loom and 11 other collection points had created a massive emotional liberation. Dreamwatch wasn't just a small organization as I had thought. This was the resistance, the one Valence had mentioned. They had operated in secret for hundreds of years, waiting for an opportunity to attack the collection networks. The organization was founded in 1692 by an unusual alliance. Father Benedict Morrison, a Catholic priest, Rabbi Sarah Goldstein, a Jewish scholar, Imam Abdullah Rashid, an Islamic scholar, Dr. Tran Dai Min, a Taoist alchemist, and even Seraphil, an archangel who had been cast out of heaven for refusing to stand by and watch humanity suffer. Each founding member of Dreamwatch had realized that the manipulation of human emotions was not merely a mundane issue, but part of a cosmic battle between the forces of control and the forces of free will. They had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity's autonomy over their own emotions. Now, after the collection networks were destroyed, Dreamwatch had transformed from a resistance organization into a healing organization. We no longer had to hide in the shadows. Instead, we operated openly as a mental health support network. I had become a nightmare counselor. Using my understanding of the nature of fear, I helped children and adults overcome their deepest anxieties. The irony was that I, a creature born of fear, was now helping others conquer it. Ophelia had grown into a remarkable and well-adjusted child. Her family had moved to a coastal town, not just for health reasons, but because she had begun to display more of her Gaia-chosen powers. Near the sea, where the connection between all life forms was strongest, she could practice safely. She had begun to heal damaged ecosystems by communicating with plants and animals. Local wildlife populations had recovered dramatically. Pollution levels in the area had mysteriously decreased. Environmental scientists couldn't explain these changes, but I knew the truth. The story of the warm shadow man had spread far beyond the local area. It had become a modern legend, a tale that parents told their children to teach them that not all darkness was evil and that love could transform even the most terrifying things. Many children no longer feared the dark. Instead, they viewed it as a friend, a protector. Nightlight sales had decreased by 34% globally. Reports of children's nightmares continued to decline. Child psychologists worldwide had noted a remarkable improvement in children's emotional resilience. I visited Ophelia often, but our relationship had evolved. She no longer needed protection. Instead, we were partners in the effort to heal the world. She worked with living systems. I worked on healing the trauma the collection networks had caused. The house I now lived in was not just a home, but a safe house for survivors of emotional manipulation. Those who had once been affected by the Umbral Loom's activities often found their way here. I provided them with counseling, support, and most importantly, proof that recovery was possible. I had amassed a vast library on emotional healing, trauma recovery, and spiritual rejuvenation. But the most valuable books in my collection were the journals written by survivor stories of those who had overcome fear, depression, and despair to find joy again. When I looked in the mirror now, I saw a truly unique being, not entirely human, not entirely shadow, but something new. I was living proof that nature isn't fixed, that even creatures born of darkness can choose the light. The shadows behind me in the reflection were still there, but they no longer represented a threat. They represented potential. The potential to protect, the potential to comfort, the potential for the kind of darkness that brings peaceful sleep and sweet dreams. The world still had its problems, of course. Greed, hatred, violence, these emotions still existed. But now they were genuine human emotions, not artificially amplified by alien manipulators. Humanity had reclaimed its right to feel its own emotions, to make its own choices, and to find its own path to happiness. 5 years had passed since the Umbral Loom collapsed. I had become a respected figure in the global mental health community, though most people didn't know my true nature. They saw me as a remarkably effective therapist with unconventional methods. Ophelia, now 13, had begun formal training with other Gaia-chosen individuals around the world. Her psychic abilities had fully developed. She could communicate with all forms of life and even heal the wounds of the earth. Only 12 of them were alive at any given time, and they formed a network of environmental healers. She regularly corresponded with a boy in the Amazon rainforest, a girl in the Arctic ice fields, and others scattered across all continents. Dreamwatch had expanded into a truly global organization with 50,000 members. We operated openly under the name International Emotional Welfare Fund, providing mental health services, environmental healing, and spiritual guidance to anyone in need. But we also maintained our vigilance. The universe was vast, and the Umbral Empire was just one of many threats to the free will of sentient beings. Signals from deep space indicated that other collector species were aware of what had happened on Earth. Some might attempt to reclaim the planet. I still spent many nights sitting on rooftops, watching over children's sleep. Not because I was hunting fear, but because I was ensuring that their dreams still belonged to them. Occasionally, I met other shadow entities, refugees from collapsed collector networks, lost and confused in the new world. Most of them were like I once was, artificial constructs that no longer understood their purpose. I helped them find new meaning in their existence. Some became gardeners, using their connection to shadows to help plants grow. Others became protectors of endangered species, shielding them from human encroachment. A few chose to disappear, allowing themselves to dissolve back into cosmic energy. I respected their choices. Not everyone could adapt to freedom after generations of servitude. Tonight, I received a message from Ophelia. She had sensed something stirring at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, where the depth protocol once operated. Sonar data showed something large was moving down there. It might be nothing, or it might be the beginning of a new threat. I would investigate tomorrow. Ophelia would coordinate with the other Gaia-chosen individuals to monitor the planet's emotional levels. Dreamwatch agents worldwide would be put on alert. But tonight, I simply sat here, watching the stars and feeling grateful for the gift of free will. The universe was vast and full of wonders as well as horrors. Darkness would always exist, but so would light. Fear would always be a part of conscious experience, but so would love. I was no longer afraid of what I might become. I had learned that we are not defined by our origins, but by our choices. Every day, I chose to protect instead of harm, to heal instead of hurt, to love instead of fear. The shadow behind me stretched across the rooftop tonight, but it faced the sunrise. Dawn was coming, as it always does, and with it came new hope for all sentient beings brave enough to face the light. In the depths of the Pacific, 11 km beneath the surface, a mechanical eye opened. It glowed red for exactly 3 seconds, recorded the current date and time, then shut off. A timer activated, 2847 days 13, 42 and counting down. Somewhere in the universe, those who sent the original auditor were paying attention to Earth's liberation. Plans were being made, ships prepared. The next phase of the cosmic game was about to begin. But for now, children slept safely, lovers dreamed sweetly, and hope burned bright in human hearts. Whatever darkness might come, Earth would not face it alone. We had learned to fight with light, resist with love, and never surrender our right to feel. The watch continued. Tonight I was sitting on the rooftop of a family with a newborn baby. Not to harm the baby, but to protect. Other shadow creatures still existed. Not all were like me, and my job was to ensure they didn't harm innocent children. As I sat there, I felt a peace I had never known. The darkness around me was no longer cold and terrifying. Instead, it was warm and protective, like a soft blanket covering the children's sleep. I looked up at the night sky, where the stars sparkled brightly. One of those stars, I knew, was where Valence, Caleb, and the others were resting. They had found the peace they deserved. Nero, a familiar voice called from behind me. I turned to see Ophelia climbing onto the rooftop. She had grown taller, but her eyes were still as clear as the first day I met her. "Ophelia," I said, "what are you doing here? It's late." "I couldn't sleep," she said, sitting down beside me. "I thought you might be lonely." "I'm not lonely," I said. "I have you and you have me," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. We sat there in silence, looking up at the night sky. The darkness around us was not terrifying, but peaceful and good. It was the kind of darkness that children didn't need to fear. "Uncle," Ophelia said, "I know you will always protect me and all other children." "Yes," I said, "that's my promise." "And that's my promise too," she said. "When I grow up, I will help you." I smiled. "You've already helped me, Ophelia. You taught me how to love. And you taught me how not to be afraid," she replied. When dawn broke, I took Ophelia home. She waved goodbye from her bedroom window, and I knew she would have a good night's sleep. I returned to my dwelling, a small house on the outskirts of the city. This was not a terrifying tower or a horrific underground lair. This was just a normal house, where I could live like a normal person. In my house, I had a bookshelf filled with books on child psychology, on how to help children overcome fear. I had a comfortable armchair where I sat and read, and I had a real bed, not a spot under the bed, but a comfortable bed where I could sleep a peaceful sleep. But most importantly, I had pictures on the wall. Pictures of Ophelia, pictures of other children I had helped, and pictures of friends who had sacrificed themselves. They reminded me why I did this work. As I prepared for bed, I looked in the mirror and saw a completely different creature than the one I had once been. I still had scars from the past, but they were no longer terrifying. Instead, they were signs of survival, of change, of a shadow creature that could become light. The darkness behind me stretched, but it wasn't cold. It was warm and protective, like a pair of wings sheltering beautiful dreams. I, Nero Thorn, had once been a creature of fear. But now I was a guardian of hope, and I would continue this work, protecting the sleep of children until no child had to fear the darkness anymore. Because I had learned that even in the deepest darkness, there could be light, and that light began from the heart. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, I received an urgent message from Dreamwatch. A child in another area was troubled by continuous nightmares. The family had tried everything but couldn't help the child. I went there and saw a boy about 5 years old, with dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. The boy looked at me fearfully at first, but when I smiled and spoke in a gentle tone, he began to trust me. "Who are you, mister?" the boy asked. "I am the guardian of sleep," I said. "I came here to help you not be afraid anymore." "Are you a monster?" "No," I shook my head. "I once was, but a little girl taught me how to be good." The boy looked at me with curious eyes. "What was that little girl's name?" "Ophelia," I said, "and you can also become a good person like her." I spent that entire night with the boy, telling him stories of hope and love. When the boy finally fell asleep, I sat beside his bed, protecting his sleep. And as I sat there, I realized that this was the meaning of my life. Not to cause fear, but to bring hope. Not to destroy, but to protect, not to take, but to give. I had found my way home, and that path led me to children who needed protection, to sleeps that needed shelter, to hearts that needed healing. Darkness still existed, but now I knew that light also existed, and just a little light, a little love, a little care could change the whole world. My story had ended, but the story of love and hope continued, and I would be a part of that story forever. Because I had learned that even a shadow creature could become light, and that light would never fade. However, deep beneath the ground in the ruins of the Umbral Loom Tower, a small mechanical ear from the Auditor still remained. It lay in the darkness, its small red light blinking 3 times then shutting off.